welcome back to another episode of the Agency Digital Podcast. Today, I'm pleased to be joined by Mikhail, who's the co-founder and CEO of Chattermill, a leading customer experience intelligence platform, and also a host of a podcast show. Mikhail, it's great to have you here.
Yes, thank you, Mikey. Thanks for inviting
me. To get this going, for anyone hearing about you or the company for the first time, can you give us the quick background of what you do and the problem that you solve?
Of course, yeah. What we do is probably a little bit niche, so I don't expect every single listener here has come across this. We help large consumer brands, companies that you would use in daily lives, like Uber, H&M, Booking.com, find insights about their customer experience by applying AI to voice of the customer data. And voice of the customer data is essentially kind of every time you communicate with the brand via something like a survey or maybe a review that you will leave, or of course, if you reach out with some problem on the customer support channel or maybe rant about them on social media, this all goes into Chattermill. And then what we help these brands with is understanding exactly what the customers like, what they don't like, and figure out what they need to prioritize to improve the product, improve their offering, improve their service, all this in combination of which we call customer experience.
Mm-hmm. Could you give any specific example of the data that you are able to evaluate?
Well, I guess the most traditional type of data in our space is something like surveys. So you probably receive a lot of surveys after you shop with a brand, or maybe halfway through your subscription or something like that. These like what can we do better type surveys. Some people fill them out, some people don't, but you tend to get a lot of really valuable information there, especially if you ask people like what do you like, what you don't like. What can we do better? People quite often actually, for these brands that they care about, they will tell them a lot of really interesting things. But then it becomes a real issue is that, like, you ask people for surveys, you ask for this data, you actually got a lot of really valuable stuff back. But then how do you actually make sense of it at scale? So if you're a big multinational with millions of customers, it is actually really hard to organize this data into something that you can say, okay, the number one issue for us is this, and then the second biggest one is that, right? And then decompose it down to like very precise problems, because every problem in customer experience if you start thinking about it, you realize like these things are actually really complicated. Like, let's say your package arrived 2 days late. Is it the same problem as a package arrived 2 minutes late, or is it like slightly different problem, right? Do you see like, in one industry that this is a giant issue, in another, like, if you're talking food delivery and your order arrived 2 days late, like at that point, you're probably not even interested in that order. If you're ordering a sofa, then 2 days late is probably okay in most cases, right? And so on and so on. And then, in some cases, like something arriving early is actually a good thing. In other cases, something arriving early is actually really bad. So understanding exactly what makes this issue different to that issue, what this means, like, is it a positive or negative in this specific context, exactly how to decompose it is actually surprisingly difficult. And even humans struggle with it because like you put three humans on this problem, and they all quite often come up with different answers. So what we do is we help objectify this. So we apply AI in very sort of robust ways to make sure that like there is one process that is always applied to the same data, but also to actually just make it possible to look at like millions and millions of these like conversations, tweets, reviews on Trustpilot, or reviews on the App Store, all these surveys as well, and then say, okay, like, our number one problem is this. Our second biggest problem is that. If we want to understand exactly what's driving that first problem, here are like the three things driving it. So, maybe our big problem, and, it's not a huge mystery in a lot of, let's say, e-commerce situations, number one problem is always logistics, almost always logistics. But then exactly like what is exactly driving logistics today versus maybe a week ago? It turns out like there's a lot of things that can go wrong. Like it can be a supplier that wasn't working, maybe we didn't have the right address, maybe our website broke, or like didn't have the right field to put your address correctly. Maybe like we didn't account for a specific geography, that they have like different formats of addresses. Like there are like 100 different things that can go wrong. Or maybe you want to track the delivery, so delivery is actually fine, but you can't track it, right? Like millions of these like tiny little things that can go wrong, and you can't predict them upfront. Sometimes like your experience is working exactly the same, and then suddenly you get feedback that like things are different, and it turns out it's because someone else, maybe a competitor or maybe someone in a completely different field, has brought some innovation, and now people are expecting you to have that. So maybe Amazon is now doing one-click shopping, and suddenly people are complaining like, why can't I get one click on in your store? Why can't I get something delivered this evening? I was just shopping on Amazon, and they were offering delivery options for me to deliver something before tomorrow's morning, and we're speaking kind of fairly late in the evening. So like if I'm starting my own e-commerce store, it's just something that's like incredibly hard to offer this kind of product. But suddenly, like that's the expectation of your customers, and so you, for better or for worse, need to deal with it one way or another, right? So these things, like this is something that is incredibly interesting in our space. Jeff Bezos famously once said that customers are always delightfully unsatisfied, and that's absolutely true. That like no matter how great your product is, like people will still find something new that they want and something different that they want, and we help make this like more precise for people, quantified, and allow them to actually make decisions backed by some real data.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. Did you have like e-commerce background before building Chattermill? Or what were you actually doing, and what made you actually start paying attention to customer experience as a problem that's worth solving?
Yeah, I just gave e-commerce as one example. That's not all we do. So we work with companies across all different types of industries, travel, transportation, energy, everything. But surprisingly, the answer to your question is yes. I did work actually in an e-commerce company for a little while before starting Chattermill, and I guess like the idea for Chattermill actually came from my co-founder Dmitry, and he had this idea like that you can apply machine learning, which was the term of art at the time. These days, people will say AI, to all this voice of the customer data to find insights buried in the data. So he was part of a company that did this manually or using by hand, essentially like having an army of humans who would kind of sit down and code what was at the time called this data. Something no one really does anymore. But at the time, it was very expensive, very manual process, but it was incredibly valuable. And so he had this idea that like you can actually marry the new technology to solve that very big problem. And I think one of the reasons it spoke to me when we met was that I did work in this e-commerce startup at the time, and we were selling furniture online. And if you think about furniture a little bit, that it's a big purchase for a lot of people. It's a fairly big purchase, and specifically, like the model we had at the time was that like you would wait fairly long until this arrives, and then there's a whole number of things that can go wrong. They made it incorrectly, so there is some sort of like little chip somewhere. They made it correctly, but it got stuck, as it sometimes happens. Like the container ship gets stuck somewhere, and so it arrives like a month late, 2 months late, 3 months late, or maybe it actually arrived in the UK, but they couldn't like deliver it to your home for whatever reason, or they actually delivered it to your home, but they cracked it while delivering, right? Like there's so many things that go wrong. And we were at the time trying to be like extremely data driven. And so we used like lots of different numbers about like every click that happens on our website. We would measure and think about like, what can we do better? But the big part of like whether customers would buy from us again or not was not actually the website. It was this sort of experience. Like, did it actually arrive on time? Like, okay, we can maybe track that. But like, were the delivery drivers nice to you when they brought it into your flat? Did they take off their shoes, right? Like these tiny little things that are really important when you think about furniture. Turns out, like, there's no way to measure them. Definitely not all across the whole customer experience, and it's very hard to then kind of understand. Okay, we can measure a lot of things, but what kind of stuck to customer? What stuck in their mind? Maybe actually, like, the delivery was horrible, but the chair was so good that they actually don't care, right? A lot of the times that's true. Or maybe it's the vice versa, that like the chair is actually great, but because the delivery was so awful that they have like a terrible memory of it forever, right? And they will never come back to you. And a lot of the times in e-commerce, for example, right, like you don't make much profit on the first purchase, but you make a lot when people come back to you. And that's how some of the most successful brands, how they build the success that they have is that they have people who come back over and over and over and over again. Like, if you look at Uber, you look at Amazon, the Airbnb, Apple, it's almost always built on this like huge following that starts from a repeated relationship with the brand. But to get there, you do need to provide great experience, and one way or another, right? Either you focus on the product or you focus on some of the other bits. But more and more, you kind of have to focus on everything, because if you don't, your competitors probably will. So for me, that idea spoke a lot, because this was a huge part of the decision that customer makes on like whether come back or not, that is not really quantified in any way. People at best kind of have some sort of guess about like, is our experience doing well or not? What are some of the top problems that we are experiencing? Which one should we solve today? Because, you always have limited resources, and you do need to think about like, are we going to improve the delivery experience, or are we actually going to go and find a better supplier for those chairs? It's it's a hard problem that every business has to solve all the time, and most businesses, most of the time, unfortunately, are not solving the right problems. So for me, like, as soon as I heard about this idea, this was kind of light bulb moment that this is a really valuable input into every decision.
What are some of the, let's say, free things that these big brands that you are working with or are not working with are doing over and over wrong in customer experience, or maybe there could be improvement?
Well, I think look, the number one, like, first of all, I think it's a mistake to assume that like everyone is doing the same mistakes, because customer experience is a really weird space. As soon as you start thinking about it a little bit, you realize like, there is no such thing as like just good customer experience. Like, there is a good customer experience for your brand, and we write a lot about customer experience, and I frequently like to use these examples where I would say like Ryanair, for example, a company that like all of us in Europe are very familiar with, right? Um, you know, on the, in some naive interpretation, is like, this is a terrible customer experience, right? And in fact, they're kind of like really famous for making fun of themselves, even that like we have this terrible customer experience, right? But when you think about it, they actually have a fantastic customer experience, because they understand what's important for their customers, and they do everything in service of that need. Like, yes, they might not have windows where you sit, and like they might kind of like charge you for every little thing, but like the number one thing Ryanair customer cares about is price, and that's where they do a great job, right? They're frequently the cheapest, and they get you from point A to point B. I guess that is also really important, right? But then you look at another brand. So another example I quite like to cite is something like Hermes, right? Like, Hermes is a luxury brand, and they again, like, if you think about like what is a smooth customer experience, they do everything the opposite way. They actually make it really hard for you to buy in their stores. You can't go inside the store and buy one of those bags that everyone wants. You actually have to like wait in line. You have to buy something else first. They're frequently kind of mean to you, maybe not exactly mean, but they'll not refuse to sell you stuff, and they have like make you suffer and suffer to actually make a purchase, which like seems like terrible customer experience, but But actually, in their case, it's great because the number one thing that people care about is exclusivity. And if you want to be in a like very exclusive club, you don't want other people to easily enter that club, right? So then you want the owner of the club to be kind of like a little bit mean and to be like very sort of snotty and so on. So in their case, like this works, right? But if like Amazon tried to do it, it would be completely wrong. And so what we always see like people make a mistake is like they kind of think that they know what their customers care about because they think like, oh, we are in this industry, for example. So like everyone in this industry does that. And it turns out like the best companies in any industry, they kind of reinvent what it means, right? Like you think about IKEA, another like favorite example of mine. Like you would think that like forcing your customers to put together your products is a terrible customer experience, right? Like if you think about like what is better, is it to get a chair that's already made or to put one together yourself? You would think that like of course it's better to get one that's already made, right? But turns out like people like IKEA is the biggest brand in furniture by far, right? Because it's actually like people are happy to put things together if they get it much cheaper, and in fact kind of like people then fall in love with their IKEA products sometimes even more than the chair they bought for 3, 4, 10 times the price. So it's very human psychology generally, and customer service as one version of it is very strange, and so you don't want to make assumptions. You want to actually understand exactly what your customers care about, right? You want to find like that audience. What is your audience? Yeah, for Amazon it's maybe everyone. For Hermes it's definitely not everyone. You want to understand that audience, understand what is important for them, track it over time, understand how this changes, and so on and so on. And I think most of the mistakes we see in customer experience is something like that, where you assume that like because someone else is doing this, then like I should be doing that, or like of course our customers want like faster this. Quicker that, smoother that, and it turns out like that's not always the case. Actually, sometimes people don't care. Actually, sometimes they like that that it's slow, right? We had this one fascinating case to me where an energy company thought like looked at Amazon and thought like Amazon has this like super smooth checkout. How about we have this amazing checkout? And they invested quite a lot of effort in making their checkout process like super quick, like a couple of clicks. But turns out like then customers were looking at that checkout and they were like, how do you know all this stuff about me? That seems a bit creepy. And they were actually unhappy about this checkout being super smooth. This is something that like you can't necessarily predict. And yeah, I would say like assuming that there is a textbook customer experience is probably like the number one mistake.
Wow. Very good insights. Yeah, you're definitely right about Ryanair. They serve a certain persona, and Hermes also. So it's you also got a podcast called How to Love a Customer. Why have you started that, and what taught you? What it taught you?
I think yeah, so I think it's those topics we just discussed. It's just customer experience is so weird, and people have so little understanding of it. It's such a strange discipline. Like there is no textbooks about it. Like there are textbooks, but I think we are still only like figuring it out. And so we thought it would be valuable for our customers, for our prospects, for the community at large to kind of like bring a little bit more knowledge, make it a bit more public, and not like the theoretical knowledge, not this stuff that like you can get from a lot of thought leaders, but talking with actual practitioners, like what happens in this industry, what happens in that industry. And so we interview people who lead customer experience typically, or they work in customer experience in different industries, and it's fascinating how different that experience tends to be, and like what kinds of things come up in e-commerce, in travel, like even in e-commerce, like you talk to a company that doing shoes or sports fashion versus like we have an interview with one company that does toilet paper, right? And of course, like it's a very different type of engagement you have with your customers, very different brands, and or like you talk to companies doing finance, for example, again, a huge, like completely separate sort of industry where a lot of things work the opposite way. You don't want, again, things always to be easy and smooth, although sometimes you actually do. So we wanted to do that. We also wanted just to like engage more people in the community. To be honest, I wanted just to learn it myself, and I learn something new almost every single episode, and yeah, that's been fantastic, I think.
Mm-hmm. And Mikhail, where's your head at right now? What's coming next for Customer Mill? Cheddar Mill,
Well,
sorry.
The big thing I think everyone is thinking about or doing something about it in like the whole of software really is of course AI and agents, and we're not different. We've kind of rode every AI wave since AI kind of started getting really popular in 2015 or so. So we were one of the first companies in our space who adopted kind of deep learning using these language models that are very similar to the ones that kind of we use today for chat. But today, the tech has fundamentally shifted, and a lot of the things like we only dreamed about, and we would quite often kind of like talk about like, oh, at some point in the future this would be possible, but we would sometimes like have no idea how exactly it will be possible. Are actually now possible. So that's an incredibly exciting moment, and we are developing our own agents right now that take advantage of all of the experience, all of the tools we've built over the years, all of the kind of actual work we've done for customers, that our humans have done for customers, packaging it in agents that can perform these intelligence type tasks at a superhuman level, frankly. So we're working a lot on that, and we're also working about like how do we then make those agents, both our agents and agents our customers use, Claude, ChatGPT, any of these, or more and more custom agents that they build. How do we make them more powerful over time? And we figure that to make them more powerful over time, they need context. Same as your human employees, you don't hire humans for every task separately from some sort of platform for freelancers. You actually quite often want employees who stay with you for years and who share, who both know where the sort of bodies are buried, right? Where what worked, what hasn't worked, but they also know just what's going on, and they can share experience with each other. We believe that this will be also very important for agents, and that's what we are working on right now.
Great. Mikhail, where can people find you?
So I am fairly active on LinkedIn. That tends to be the platform of choice. Of course, please subscribe to How to Love a Customer, the podcast. And otherwise, you can also find me on Twitter, although I'm not particularly active there.
Okay. Thank you for joining.